welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a concept that genuinely has the power to completely rewire how you approach your daily struggles. We're talking about the transformation of dua, taking it from a passive, maybe kind of doubtful supplication, and turning it into a state of absolute, unwavering certainty. We'll be pulling from some incredible source material today to really unpack the mechanics of how this works. And honestly, your perspective on asking for what you want is going to profoundly shift by the end of this. So before we get into the actual mechanics, I want you to ask yourself something. What is your impossible mountain? Think about your deepest anxieties right now. Maybe it's a huge career block, a sudden health crisis, or just crushing financial stress. How far are you really willing to go to find true relief in this chaotic world? I mean, we spend so much energy, so much time and money trying to escape our worries. But are we even looking in the right place? There's this brilliant anecdote in the sources about worldly escapes. Think about some of the wealthiest billionaires on the planet, people who can literally afford anything. Once a year, they'll fly their private jets all the way to Lake Geneva in Switzerland for this single-night carnival, just desperately seeking a fleeting moment of happiness and escape. But then you contrast that with what the sources call the supreme activity, which is nightly isolation and private spiritual communion with the divine. You don't need a private jet for it, it's completely free, and unlike some temporary carnival, it offers profound, lasting peace. All right. Section 1, the supreme activity. So let's pivot away from those empty worldly pursuits for a second and look at what the sources describe as literally the most effective action a human being can take to find relief. It actually starts with a highly practical tool, a beautifully structured 1-hour pre-sleep routine. Now, step 0 here is turning off your phone. Seriously, turn it off, because those earthly distractions completely kill spiritual connection. Then you just divide your hour into 4 simple 15-minute blocks. First, 15 minutes of reading the Quran. Second, 15 minutes of istighfar, which is seeking forgiveness, kind of clearing your slate for the day. Third, 15 minutes of tasbih, glorifying the divine. And finally, 15 minutes of salawat, sending blessings upon the Prophet. Dedicating just 1 hour before sleep to this specific routine can completely rewire your spiritual connection. It untethers you from the heavy gravity of your daily stress and makes you what the sources call a heavenly person. Which brings us to Section 2, certainty, the ultimate condition. Now, doing that nightly routine is amazing, obviously, but there is a vital prerequisite you have to bring into those quiet night hours, and it's found in the definition of yaqeen, or certainty. The source material makes this fascinating distinction. See, certainty is not merely adab. It's not just some polite recommended etiquette when you're asking the divine for something. No, it is a shart. It's an absolute non-negotiable condition for the prayer to actually be answered. Approaching the Creator without absolute faith that He will respond, that actually renders the action incomplete. Certainty isn't just the nice to have, it's the very engine of your request. Just take a second to really absorb this profound quote from the sources. If God guides you to make dua, He will answer. Think about the logic there for a moment. The very inspiration you feel in your heart to ask for something, that's the ultimate proof that the Creator already intends to give it to you. That impulse to ask is literally the first half of the answered prayer. Let's move to Section 3, the power of persistence. So, what happens when absolute certainty meets continuous, desperate effort? This brings us to the concept of al-ilha. This is the continuous, burning persistence of someone in deep distress, a state known as muttar. True persistence, it doesn't come from casually asking for a favor. It comes from a visceral place of absolute reliance and brokenness. It's the pleading of a person who literally has nowhere else to turn, someone whose heart is completely disconnected from earthly solutions and attached only to the sky. And we see this applied perfectly in a real-life story from our sources. Picture this. There's a Sudanese expat sitting in a coffee shop on a Wednesday. He's deeply depressed, completely broke, and he's been unemployed for 7 months. Someone gives him the advice to persistently engage in dua and that pre-sleep routine we talked about. So by Friday afternoon, he's dedicating his entire focus to sincere, desperate pleading. On Saturday morning, out of absolutely nowhere, he's offered a job for 2,500 rials. But wait, it gets better. By Sunday, a friend calls with an even better offer of 3,000 rials. In just 4 days, his continuous persistence shifted his entire reality. And this kind of urgency, it is definitely not just a modern phenomenon. Think about the number 7 for a second. It represents a timeless historical parallel from the sources. 7 is the exact number of times Hajar frantically ran back and forth between the mountains of Safa and Marwa in a barren, scorching desert, desperately seeking water for her infant son, Ismail. She was alone, in absolute poverty before God, and completely broken. It perfectly illustrates how extreme desperation and persistent effort actually summon miraculous divine intervention, which, in her case, was the gushing well of Zamzam that literally still flows today. Let's look at the bigger picture in Section 4, Real-Life Miracles. So let's see what happens when the supreme activity, unbreakable certainty, and burning persistence all combined. You get outcomes that completely defy medical and earthly logic. Take the story from the sources. A mother with stage 4 cancer. At 11:30 p.m., the doctors stop resuscitation. The medical staff deems the case entirely hopeless. The end is imminent. They basically advise the family to just pray. So from that moment until dawn, her family engages in desperate, persistent dua, calling upon Al-Jabbar, the restorer, in the deep depths of the night. By 8 a.m. the next morning, new medical tests are run and they return perfectly clear. The doctors are absolutely stunned. And just 4 days later, this mother is discharged and recovering at home. Her deadly medical chart was entirely rewritten overnight. Okay, so how do we actually apply this? Let's recap the core actionable takeaways here. First, you have to acknowledge absolute poverty before God. You've got to strip away the ego, much like the prophets Ibrahim and Zakaria did. Second, call upon Al-Jabbar, the restorer, the one who mends what is broken, and do it especially in those quiet night hours. Third, keep your heart tethered to the sky. Don't let the heavy gravity of earthly anxieties and distractions pull you down. And finally, ensure your actions and your income are pure so you aren't accidentally blocking the path of your own prayer. Which brings us to our final thought. The sources explicitly remind us that, unlike human beings who get tired of being asked for things, the Creator's hands are always open. He actually loves for you to ask. So I'm going to leave you with this. If the door is wide open and the absolute certainty of an answer is guaranteed to the persistent heart, what is stopping you from asking tonight? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Seriously, take that 1-hour routine, find your certainty, and go move your mountain.